Here's a breakdown of 9 different interior design styles, because I didn't have enough time to do 10. Starting with traditional interior design. I would say this is probably the most common design style. Some people would even classify it as a default interior design, especially in the West, over here in North America. It's heavily inspired by timeless 19th and even 18th century interiors. The decor itself should feel pretty orderly, I would say, and you'll often see symmetry being a major theme in traditional design. Classic looking furniture, antiques, also big, big, big. There really is this feeling of structure, and you'll often see more of that ornate woodworking like crown molding or wainscoting. One of the complaints that people have with traditional interior design is it can feel a little predictable. I wouldn't necessarily call it boring, but that's one of its benefits because it also helps it feel very comfortable, very comforting, very home feeling. The colors that can be part of traditional interiors are actually pretty wide in their range, and there's usually a lot of creams and beige at the core, but you can also have dark woody browns, terracotta reds, clean off-whites, minty greens, khakis. You could pick a ton of different colors, especially if you look at some color collections by paint companies that are called classics or 1800, 1900 colors, timeless colors. Those are all great choices for traditional interior design. And also, you can just look at one of your favorite antique pieces and then extract some of the colors found in that, and then you can be inspired from there. So from traditional, we're transitioning to transitional. So as you might expect with similar names, transitional design takes a lot of the principles from traditional and transitions it into the modern era. The foundation of structure is still there, but the main difference is the addition of more modern looking furniture. So you will see those traditional, more cozy curvatures that you'll see in traditional design, but with the modern touch, you're now introducing some of those geometric shapes. You'll see more straight lines as well. And beige as a color is usually replaced with grayish. So maybe some of those traditional antiques have been resprayed and refinished white or off-white. For a lot of people, transitional design is really the best of both worlds because you're utilizing those really strong principles, that timeless essence of traditional design, but then you add that fresh and up-to-date modern flair that a lot of people gravitate towards. Now, what if you just wanted modern? You wanted to go full modern. Never go full modern. So modern design is kind of a tricky thing to explain sometimes because you may just assume modern is whatever's happening now. This is what's happening. The current design that's happening right now, that's just modern. You really have to think of it as just a separate, distinct classification of design. Really, it is an interesting one because modern may not feel very modern 10 years from now, but as it stands right now, modern design as we know it is very stripped down and minimal. So there's zero clutter, very few accessories, and extremely neutral colors, if you can even call them that. Usually it's just a ton of white, maybe some off-white, some gray, and I would say that a lot of these lighter neutrals in general will feel either just stark or a bit cooler. So you won't really see as much warmer coloration. You won't see a lot of creams and yellows with modern typically. So a big theme of modern design is there's gonna be a lot more straight lines, a lot of geometry visually. Everything is very calculated, very precise. And also the materials that are used are going to be more raw and pure, like plaster and concrete, porcelain, metal, things like that. Not necessarily the most comfortable design in my opinion, but it's one that I like to incorporate in smaller doses because I often like to combine styles with the way that I live. But as a whole, if you're into that uber minimalist style, then modern is probably what you would gravitate towards. Next is industrial, another design style that uses a lot of raw materials, but it has a very different look compared to modern. Because instead of pure whites and grays, industrial design introduces things like dark or even black metals, brown woods, tan leather. If you have the opportunity to use exposed brick walls, even better. Really, a lot of the design is inspired by post-industrial revolution, factories and warehouses. Everything feels a bit utilitarian and it can be somewhat brutalist as well. But there also is this overarching rustic quality that brings a coziness to industrial design and gives it a lot of character. It's one of my favorite design styles, especially in a place like this, which is a hard log loft. It's a repurposed shoe factory that is now condominiums. Really, really cool. Industrial design doesn't utilize a ton of accessories either, similar to modern, but the ones that are used are very impactful. So we like to call them found objects that might have actually come from the factory itself or are heavily inspired by. So nothing should really feel out of place with industrial design. Everything should really have a purpose, or at least follow that same theme. You will have a lot of people that will take industrial aspects and then apply it to other design styles, most notably a modern farmhouse design perhaps. Farmhouse is heavily inspired by farmhouses, or just rural living in general. You'll see a lot of shiplap, barn doors, a lot of mixed woods and metals, and some greenery. There is a lovely rustic charm when it comes to farmhouse, and it doesn't need to be overly organized design-wise either. So you naturally have this really comforting feeling with farmhouse, but also just because it's not organized design-wise, it doesn't mean you have a dirty house, like clean your house. But the thing is, you don't have to feel like everything needs to be in a certain place. It doesn't need to be matchy-matchy with farmhouse. There's also not always a huge depth of color. You'll have a lot of warm neutrals, I would say, but usually a lot of the color will come from things like natural woods, lighter metals, or even stone walls. I find that a lot of cottages will have a farmhouse aesthetic, and that's because it's a very homey feeling design. You'll have big comfy couches, big chairs that just envelop you. It's really function over form for me. There has also been an emergence of a more modern variation that is a bit more sleek and perhaps refined without sacrificing the charm. Modern farmhouse can also introduce more of the grays and the greiges and maybe even some blues, but at its core, farmhouse has that feeling of just welcome home. What about boho? Boho is short form for bohemian. Oftentimes it's equated to maximalism, which is the opposite of minimalism. So a lot of stuff rather than nothing. It started in the 1960s, and as a design style, it just feels very carefree. That's one of the calling cards of boho. It really is a no rules way of decorating. Now, there are some core principles that remain consistent from design to design, but the nice thing is you can really just throw a bunch of your favorite textiles and rugs and plants and colors and call it boho. You'll often see tons of different bright and saturated colors within Bohemian design. You can mix patterns and textures. Even layering rugs on top of each other is extremely common. So you may have just a neutral base, kind of beigey rug on the bottom, and then you might have a couple Persian rugs on top, a fake wool throw, whatever you want to do. No rules. The world is your oyster with boho. Another big aspect of boho is you really feel like you're one with the world, both in the forms of plant life that you bring in. Greenery is huge with boho, but also international accessories and furniture. So even if you're not a world traveler, you'll look like one if your place is boho. You just have a bunch of pieces from different continents that you're not living in. Looks like you're very cultured. Fake it till you make it. Full boho isn't quite as popular as it was 55 years ago, but it definitely has made a huge resurgence as of late. And also, bohemian aspects can easily be thrown into your space to give it more of a free spirit feeling. It's a great way to sort of break up the monotony of something that's otherwise grayscale and monochromatic, and dare I say, lifeless. That can maybe work in an office, but in the family room where you want to spend time and just relax, throw a couple rugs on the floor. Put them on top of each other. See how you feel. That's boho. Coastal design. Hashtag beach bod. Far from it. Coastal design is pretty self-explanatory. It's all about seaside living. So there can be a very nautical beach house vibe portrayed by coastal design. And this works even if you don't live near the beach. It uses a lot of colors you would see on the beach. So if you took a drone, let's say, and did an aerial shot over top of a beach where you see the sand and then you see the sea, those are pretty much the colors you would use. You have white for the sand, you have beige when the sand gets wet, and then you got the blue water. Those are really the core colors and the core color scheme of coastal. Maybe a bit of green as well, especially turquoise and aqua, things of that nature. So the way I utilize these colors is off-whites are popular on the walls, especially to bring in and reflect a lot of natural light. And then you have pops of saturated greens or blues, or a combination of the two with turquoise. I mean, for the furniture, you can just bring in some of your patio furniture inside. I'm just kidding, but you'll often see similar materials used for coastal style furniture. So warmer woods, wicker chairs, light linens, all that stuff. More so than a lot of design styles, I find that coastal design can be directly tied to one's lifestyle. If you're like me and you worked on a boat, well, technically it was called a ship, or maybe you grew up by the water, going coastal with your interior design can be very comforting and nostalgic. So anyone living in a big city that's really far away from water, you can kind of bring that nautical theme inside by just going with some coastal colors and furniture. It really is a fun idea, if I do say so myself. What about Scandi? Scandi is design that comes from Scandinavia. So those are cooler places in general that don't get a ton of daylight throughout the year. And the way that they've countered it is by having clean whites in their interior design to manipulate the light they do get. Bright, airy, open spaces to help that light pass through and illuminate the areas. Scandi can feel pretty minimal, kind of like modern, but what it does do is it retains some comforting elements that make it feel like home. There's a strong use of natural elements like lighter woods and greenery, and an abundance of inviting and cozy textures like thick wool blankets and faux furs. Or real furs. I'm not going down that rabbit hole with you. No judgment either way. Overall, it can be summarized with lots of white or off-white, and then some little pops of saturated color here and there. Similar to Scandi, we have Japandi. Much like Transitional Design's relation to traditional, Scandi and Japandi share a lot of core characteristics. Both are bright, clean, and modern, but Japandi brings forth some dramatic, deeper browns and charcoals and reds and greens. Similar materials are used for both designs, but instead of mostly lighter woods found in Scandi, the Japanese influence in Japandi can opt for darker brown or redwoods. Check out this Japandi palette here that I've prepared for you. Colors inspired by the fusion of Scandinavia and Japan. One of my favorite interior design styles as well.